You're listening to the official podcast for the Games Institute. We are a multidisciplinary research center located at the University of Waterloo, studying all things games and interactive technologies.
One by one, we'll sit down with our researchers to talk about what they're studying and what they're playing. No jargon, no word counts, just the cool stuff.
Hello and welcome back to the Games Institute podcast. I'm your host, Marisa Benjamin.
I'm your co-host, Tobin Rossico.
And today we are joined by Grace Wright, who is going to tell us all the secrets of ethics, technology, and social impact at Waterloo.
Wow.
Hi.
Is that true? Is that what we're going to do here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll wait for your line of questioning, but that's the general idea. That's what I've been working on for 4 months, so
there you go. I thought you were going to say, I don't know all the secrets, but I guess that means you do, in fact, know all the secrets.
all of them.
Okay, so
Right.
let us know who you are.
Okay. I am a technically third-year student at the University of Waterloo. I'm studying political science and business, and I'm on a co-op term right now at the Games Institute. I am doing research for the Council on Responsibility and Innovation in Technology. I think that's
They changed their
new
name. Yeah, because when you started,
Yeah.
they were Etsy.
Yeah, which stood for Ethics, Technology, and Social Impact.
So
Council.
now they are Responsibility, Innovation.
Council for Responsibility, Innovation, and Technology, I believe.
RIT.
It's supposed to be CRIT.
Nice.
Short for, kind of going off of critical. And
Yeah, that is clever.
And less confusing with, you work at a store that sells...
Right.
bedazzled
That was the
shoes
thing, is
and socks.
when I was trying to describe it, people be like, they constantly just think of people who are selling, like handmade macrame and things. And I was like, no, not it, but close.
It's funny. Why are you in this position? What is your role for them?
So basically, my role for this past 4 months has been to do an environmental scan of the University of Waterloo, Canada, and the world more broadly, and to try and just get a general sense of some sort of the trends that are emerging in the education, innovation, and research space that's related to social impact and technology and responsible innovation. It's an incredibly broad topic, doesn't have a very narrow scope, which was part of the difficulty starting off, but I navigated that.
I was working very closely with you, and even now hearing you say it all back, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
What does CRIT aim to do? Because my understanding is that they're a new council, and they came in from the mandate of the Office of Research because Waterloo needed some type of external, internal, maybe check for ethics in their research operations. See, it's so vague. Can you clarify that for me?
I can try to. I am also trying to understand what exactly their role is, and because they're so new, I think they're also trying to sort of shape that, which I think in part my report will help do, at least if they get a sense of what's happening at the school and around the world. But from my understanding, their kind of aim is to understand how they can create a culture at Waterloo that's more focused on embedding those perspectives of how does the technology we create and the things that we innovate here impact people on an ethical level, how does it impact society, and what are we doing here to make a positive social and global impact. That's kind of my initial understanding of it. That could be completely off, in which case, if anyone on the council is just listening, please correct me. But to kind of have that more of like a cultural shift at the school, I think finding ways to kind of embed that. Yeah.
And so would some of the platforms that you use to get this out be like social media, or is a lot of it more kind of on campus with like posters and kiosks and that kind of stuff? Like, what is the full scope of how you want to get that information out there?
In terms of like how CRIT will go about that?
Sure.
I'm not sure what they're planning on doing. I know they're having some sort of kickoff event in the fall to sort of introduce their existence. But in part, I guess, like my report outlines some gaps that I've been seeing that exist at the school. and then a few recommendations. So they might see those and be like, okay, here's some of those recommendations we can actually implement. Or they might say, none of those are anything that we really want to take up, but here we at least have some gaps we've identified.
Right.
Let's sort of like work on ideas for how to address those. So it could be through things like social media presence, but it also could be more on the side of looking at courses, for example, and trying to design more courses that are interdisciplinary, that are focused on what responsible innovation looks like, things like that. So
Nice.
it could take a lot of different forms.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about Crit, formerly Etsy, is probably what gives you the headache, which is that they are doing this bottom up rather than top down. They're not trying to think of, maybe they're going side to side rather than top down or bottom up, because they're not trying to think of what specifically they can do yet. Rather, they're trying to go at it from, okay, we want there to be some type of ethical thinking in the DNA fabric of what we do at Waterloo, whether it be education, innovation, or research. And then they're saying, what would that even possibly look like? So they're not quite there yet in terms of like wondering if it's going to be social media or posters around campus or education. Right now they're thinking, we want this to be the long-term future end goal. And what could that possibly be for us today? And then this fall, the launch event that you mentioned is going to mark the 1 year, basically, founding of Etsy, now Crit, because Neil Randall, our executive director, he became the chair of Etsy, I think around December of 2018. And then that's because the Etsy concept was conceived, would have been like September 2018. I might be getting my dates wrong. Yeah. So do you know anything more about this launch event?
Not really. I know that there's planning for it happening, but I haven't really been a part of that. That's been more on the council's end. But back to what you're saying about like them kind of going side to side. It's not necessarily a top-down approach. I really do appreciate that, because I think also part of actually finding out like how is Waterloo going to become a leader in this space. I think it's really important that they're actually trying to understand the problem area first, because I think especially in a lot of settings where people are discussing innovation and entrepreneurship or trying to address social issues, there's a growing focus on understanding your problem space and trying to really dig into that first before you start coming up with solutions, so that you actually create solutions to things that are long-lasting and more sustainable, and that work with multiple stakeholders rather than just a couple of people. So I do really appreciate that it's not a top-down approach.
Can you hone in on what problem space means? Because I've never heard that term before.
Problem space.
It sounds really cool, and I'm going to use it now moving forward with this definition.
For my understanding, problem space, I mean, it looks different depending on what you're working on. So it could be something a lot smaller. Like, let's say you're working in the area more so of like social innovation, for example, and you're looking at a problem space. You could look at something macro like poverty, or you could narrow in on it and be like, our problem space is looking at affordable housing in this particular area and factors that influence that, and trying to understand that. So it could be a very narrow problem space like that, or something larger depending on what sort of project you're working on. So mine, even though my problem space is quite broad in the sense that my environmental scan is very broad, I guess to define my problem space more specifically would be like, what gaps are we seeing within the University of Waterloo in those three domains that I mentioned, so education, research, and innovation, that that we can understand and work to understand to address that sort of issue of like, how do we embed a more how do we embed a perspective that's more focused on social impact and responsible innovation and technology.
Nice.
That's really cool. How does this environmental study fit in with your research interests or just learning interests as a political science major?
Ooh, good question.
We also forgot to ask our icebreaker question, I just realized.
Yeah.
So
Should we
let's
do
do
that at the-
icebreaker, and then we'll jump to
Okay.
that question
Sure.
because
Okay, you
I
don't
think
want
the
to finish off with the icebreaker. Do
No.
a little complete.
Oh no, because we've got a closing icebreaker too.
Oh,
Ice reformer,
wow.
I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay. Okay.
So icebreaker question, and then we'll jump back into this.
Okay.
What is your earliest childhood memory of gaming?
Oh, of gaming.
And that can be anything from Monopoly to
Right.
Or chasing
Nintendo.
somebody down. I don't know.
Right. Okay, they
cops
probably.
and robbers.
Tag.
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah, which is why I don't know why we forgot to ask it at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know what I would. I mean, I have like a bunch of different memories that are popping into my mind that all kind of happened around the same time. I remember my brothers and I. So there's 4 kids in my family, which meant that we always had each other to entertain one another. And so a lot of the games we played were just random things that we would invent. So I remember one time in the summer, we had this blow up pool in my backyard, and my brothers and I created this, like, I guess, game or race where we had to go through different parts of the house and perform these different activities and then like dunk ourselves in the pool and then just keep doing it over and over again. And
That's funny.
I would say that's probably a fairly early memory of gaming. Or just like, you know, when you're little playing what's that? Hopping. Is it hopscotch?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what? Yep. There we go.
Both examples of kinesthetic games.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want a digital one?
Do you
Sure,
have? If you
yeah.
have?
Yeah. My parents, so again, because there's 4 of us all within born within like 6 years of each other, my parents had to find a way to entertain us on long car rides.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's
my
always a tricky
dad had
thing.
rigged up this system in our minivan with like this really, really tiny TV. And then we had our Nintendo 64, and then we would take turns playing on the Nintendo 64, like entertain ourselves.
That's
As
awesome.
we drove
That
places.
is so
It's better than the road trips I had.
Wait, I wonder why they don't put games in cars just automatically.
Probably licensing. Or do you mean like the
Maybe.
availability to hook up consoles, or like
Yeah, because there's
built-in-
built-in TVs in cars,
Yeah.
and then there's no consoles.
I don't
Well,
know.
because you have extra.
Opportunity.
Hopefully it's legal. If not, I'm sorry, Dad, that I just exposed you.
Because with the console, you have an extra power. Like you need an extra power outlet. Because typically the TVs are powered through like the cigarette lighter, right?
Oh,
So you need
Oh.
the console to be plugged into something else, and those are really tricky or really expensive.
wow!
To get
Do you know
multiple
how your
things.
dad did it?
No idea.
It'd be interesting to ask him to find out how.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not common. Typically those TVs, it's just like a little screen and a slot for VHSs.
Wow.
Yeah. No,
I
this
mean, in
was
my
like
day.
TV a squish between the 2 front seats, and then
That's so cool.
yeah. And that is how they kept us from screaming the entire time.
And even sharing, it wasn't a problem, because in my family that would have been a problem.
Oh, we had to. I think we had like 2 controllers or something. So it was like whoever was in the captain seats would go first, and then we just switch
Loser
back and
passes
forth.
kind of a
Yeah.
thing. That's cool. Do
Yeah.
you remember what game it was? If it's 2 controllers?
Probably some form of Mario.
Nice.
Mario
don't
Kart,
know.
Smash.
Oh, Mario Kart while driving would be amazing.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was. I mean, honestly, I've always been pretty bad at video games, so I wouldn't even be surprised if I just kind of gave up early on, and then
Right.
that kind of reduced the tension in terms of figuring out whose turn it was.
Did you enjoy watching?
I think so, probably. I mean, I'm more of someone who likes to like stare out the window as I drive in a car. That's always
While you drive or
Would've
while
been.
somebody else drives?
while someone else drives. To clarify, while I'm on the road.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, how did I phrase the question?
Well, we
How-
can just dive back into it.
Okay. How does your environmental study impact your educational interests as a political science major?
Yeah. So I'm gonna take you way back to my first co-op term. So for my first co-op term, I was working in a place on campus called the Center for Peace Advancement. And it was there that I was introduced to the whole technology social impact space, because they have a few people in their startup incubator that are working in the tech and social impact space, but they also have an organization that's co-located there called Project Plowshares. And there was a woman from Project Plowshares. Her name is Branka Marajan, and she does a lot of work at the UN doing advocacy around killer robots. And so she had sort of started to introduce me to the side of looking at more of like the social and ethical sides of tech, which prior to that, like I hadn't really been exposed to in my formal education, because a lot of my political science courses were more like, let's understand wealth inequality and looking at government structures and things like that, which interested me. But sort of her perspective on that side of combining policy and technology and ethics and everything really, really grabbed me. And I was super, super interested in that. And so I started to look into that a lot more in my free time. And then I found ways to connect it to my schoolwork. And so the work that I'm doing right now, I see is not something that necessarily is connected to my program in a formal way. Like, it's not like we have courses where we look at technology policy or any of these sort of hot topics in tech, but I find ways to integrate them. So for example, like my last term, I was in a course called International Political Economy. And so I decided for my final essay to look at like data privacy and policy around that globally. And so that was kind of one where I had this kind of open-ended area where I could choose a topic that was related to international political economy in some way. And then I just found a way to like sneak in that ethics and social impact and tech side into it. So, and more and more, I'm also seeing that like technology policy is this growing area where people are like, okay, we shouldn't be creating policies without understanding the tech. And there needs to sort of be that collaboration between policymakers and people who are building tech so that you actually create policies that are robust and that make sense. And so I see it connecting to my training as a political science student in that way. So that even if it's not explicitly covered in my program, there's a lot of connections in terms of understanding the role of governance in technology policy and sort of those ethical and social considerations, and how that weaves into so many different aspects of society and life, which ultimately are going to influence the way that governments respond to things and how they act in non-state actors as well. So that was a very long-winded way of
it was fantastic.
So well, this is what she did in the interview.
Yeah. I have a 3-prong follow-up question.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the first one is, did you come to Waterloo already declaring political science as your major?
No.
Okay.
I actually, initially I wanted to do the Peace and Conflict Studies program. So back in high school, I was really interested in working in international development, which is not to say that I'm not interested in it anymore, but that was what I really, really like clearly thought my career path would be. And so I went into it wanting to do peace and conflict studies because I was like, okay, if I want to work in contexts where they've experienced conflict before or things like that, or where PACS, sorry, the Peace and Conflict Studies program, PACS for short, because that's a mouthful.
You Waterloo acronyms. We'll have a cheat sheet eventually.
But it seemed to have more of a development focus on it and trying to understand, like sustainable development goals and how we integrate those and understanding, just like different contexts in the way that culture can play into development, things like that. So I initially started in PACS. And then I was like, okay, well, so you have like 2 options to explore your major in first year. And so I was like, well, I'm really interested in government at the time. There's, 2016 elections were coming up and I was really, really into it. And I was like, okay, well, like, I think, politics is pretty interesting. Let me just take a political science course. And then I ended up really, really enjoying it. So then I declared political science as my major.
Wow. Okay. Which poli-sci course did you take?
I took 2. So I took Intro to Government, which was, not necessarily the most interesting course because you're just learning kind of like the structure of Canadian, but I thought it was practical. and I thought it was useful for even like to be an informed voter. You should probably understand in some capacity how your government works. But then I had taken a course in global politics, and so that one really, really interested me because we got a little bit of the side of international political economy, and I really liked that it was kind of weaving in the more like trade and economics element into politics. I like the way that those two things combine. So
yeah, this is interesting to me because I'm curious about how they think how a person's interests grow and how it's related to the 2016 election, like you mentioned. There was nothing interesting happening. There was very little interesting events happening when I was taking my poli-sci course, and so I thought it was so boring. Meanwhile, like psychology was the big craze back in my day.
Yeah.
And now you are doing the scan, which looks at education in that role. And, you mentioned things like you don't get access to ethical considerations baked into the syllabi of your courses. And yet you find it somehow. So it's curious. It's curious to me, especially talking to you about your education background and how that's shaped your research interests when you're, now in a position of doing this environmental scan, which looks at education at Waterloo and if it's informing its students about ethical considerations and social impact. I'm just like seeing all of these dots connecting.
You said your question was three-pronged.
So, yeah, we'll jump back. So you technically answered the second one, which was what was your original kind of interest.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So that's good. And then the third one is, now that you've been exposed to some more things, and specifically with this environmental study, is that shaping your trajectory for a career? Or are you still kind of just...
I like that question.
Yeah.
I would say yes to an extent. So at the beginning of the term, I was figuring out, I was like, okay, I think I probably want to do a master's just because I really enjoy school and I enjoy research. And so I'm like, before I was like, no, I just want to finish my undergrad and go into the real world and make some money, which who knows, I still might end up doing. But at this point, so I was kind of toying with the idea of a master's, and I was like, hey, if I do a master's, like, what do I want to do it in? Because I have quite a few different interests where I could see myself sort of going to those fields, but I feel like more and more I've been drawn to the sort of technology policy end of it. And then as I've been doing this research, and especially looking at education, and I've just been getting excited about all the ways that education can play a really positive role in this, and also looking into what programs exist around the world. It's influenced me to an extent where I've seen a couple of programs now that are more technology policy focused that I'm really interested in, and I'm thinking that I'll probably end up applying to, because like I've always sort of been interested in governance to an extent, but I was like, I don't want to work in government necessarily, because I was like, it takes so long to get things done. And then I was like, which who knows, I still might go that route. But there's some programs that I've seen where I'm like, they would offer me the option to go into government or go into things like corporate social responsibility, which is something that I've also been drawn to, because I'm like, then I can blend quite a few different interests sort of into that area. So it has influenced my career trajectory in a sense, as of what I feel I'm going to do right now with my master's is probably go that route, and then we'll see where that takes me. But
the good thing about your master's is it really just opens up more doors.
Yes. That's what I was going to say. And I was going to say it's interesting that another guest has kind of had an interaction with Neil Randall and everything has changed because of it.
Yeah. Are you talking about Christina?
Yeah.
Yeah. Christina was in here last week talking similar things like, oh, I wasn't considering grad school. No. Neil and Agata kind of do that.
Yeah. I was and I wasn't, and I was kind of going back and forth, and then I was like, I don't know, I really like learning. I really, really like learning. And so I was like, well, I can do that in, like, a lot of my learning I've also done outside of the classroom, where it's like that's been where my major interest picked up, have been through more experiential things like co-op. But I was like, that's why I want to also, if I'm picking a program, I want to find something that sort of blends those two things. So I get the more theoretical side of things, but then I also get hands-on experience. So
yeah, it's tough to know how you're going to learn, but I also suspect that suspect that as you get into more of the upper year courses in political science, like the 400 series stuff, it's going to be much broader, and you'll get a much more interactive learning experience.
Yeah. Like I have a couple seminar courses coming up for the fall term.
Awesome.
I'm like, it'll be a lot of reading, but it also means more discussion, which is always spicy.
Excuse me, I'm coughing over here. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what you found in this report? What does the report look like, first of all, and then what are some highlights that are interesting?
Wow. I feel like this is going to end up being me just talking for a long time with this one. So the report kind of generally looks, the way I've split it up is looking at 3 major areas of education, research, and innovation. And then within those, I've split it up into what I found at the University of Waterloo, Canada, and then the rest of the world. So some examples. This is helpful because I'm working on my executive summary right now.
Great.
So I guess sort of within the education area, I highlight a couple of really great courses that we offer that kind of dig into technology and social impact, but also have a more interdisciplinary approach to them and a much more hands-on learning experience. So things like the I think it's called Entrepreneurship for Social Impact, or the Global Engagement Seminar that I was a part of this past semester. So a couple of really good examples like that, where they're very intentional about bringing groups of students together from a bunch of different faculties and getting them to learn in a hands-on way through creating some sort of like throughout the term you're working on kind of like a larger project. So whether that's a social enterprise, or if it's, for example, when I was in that global engagement program, I worked on a project with a group of students that was focused on technology policies in AI and sort of globally what that was looking like. So yeah, the education piece for Waterloo highlights that, and then also some more experiential learning opportunities. So things like co-op, living learning communities, things like that. Yeah, so like there's one that I'm going to actually be leading in fall 2019. It's like a new living learning community that they're starting called Peace Tech. And so the idea behind that is that you're getting a group of students, again, from a bunch of different faculties and multiple years to kind of come together and do things like go to events together that are related to that, have discussions, host speakers, those sorts of things. And then in Canada and the world, I kind of look at some more emerging trends in education that I'm seeing and kind of compare what I'm seeing there to what Waterloo offers, and seeing basically where are the gaps here and where can we improve, and what things we might want to adopt. So for example, one thing is humanitarian engineering programs. So again, those are either courses or minors and things where it's focused more on the social impact side of engineering. And those are really, really cool because they're also meant to be interdisciplinary, but those programs also see far more like a much higher representation of women. And so kind of improving that representation of women in STEM is like it's like a really kind of great node into that. So that was like one of the trends I found where I'm like, this is something that you could possibly adopt that is not offered in Canada yet. But there are some other schools in other parts of the world that offer it. So things like that. And then I kind of follow that with looking at research. So highlighting a few research domains that I found that are really kind of popular in this area at Waterloo. And then highlighting researchers in that space, institutes, centers, groups. And then also comparing that again to Canada and the world, and seeing where we fall within that. And then And then on the innovation end of things, also kind of doing the same thing, highlighting some really great things we have going on, but then comparing that in context to Canada and the world and being like, okay, so what are these other trends that we're seeing? How do we stack up? That sort of thing.
What has been interesting about innovation? What trends have you noticed at Waterloo, and how do we stack up to the rest of the world?
One thing I've really noticed is that innovation at Waterloo is often synonymous with entrepreneurship, which is something that I don't see as much at other schools. So there seems to be at other schools that I've seen this at, there's a focus that innovation encompasses or they have a much broader understanding of innovation. So you could see that within education, for example, or even highlighting stories about innovation that fall outside of entrepreneurship, like community initiatives. And so that's one major thing that I would say that's like kind of the thing that sticks out to me the most is that, again, like as a student at Waterloo, my impression is always kind of that innovation and entrepreneurship are together. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I started having conversations with people as I was doing this research that I was understanding like innovation is much broader than that, and it can encompass a lot more than just entrepreneurship. And I think that also, like, having a broader view of innovation also opens it up to students who don't necessarily see themselves as entrepreneurial, but they're like, you know, I have some ideas, but I don't really know, like, how do I implement this? Like, where do I go? And that there's this, like, understanding that entrepreneurship isn't always the answer to a problem, and that, you know, like, for example, St. Paul's Greenhouse runs a few different programs that kind of move beyond the entrepreneurship element, where they have, you know, they consider innovation even something as like an innovative policy, for example, that can help. I think one example that I saw was there was an organization that, it was an organization or a school, I can't remember exactly, but they basically wanted to have a way to have some sort of suicide post-prevention strategy. And so the way that they approached that through innovation wasn't through, oh, let's create a startup that offers like this and this. It was, let's think of a policy or a strategy that they can implement that is novel to their organization that would be helpful during those times. And so I think that's sort of the biggest thing I've noticed in terms of innovation.
Yeah, that's interesting, because innovation does get co-opted a lot by entrepreneurial thinking, but there's a lot of innovative stuff that happens inside of research too. Yeah. Why did you decide to split research and innovation, though? How do you draw those lines?
That's a good question, because there's a lot of, I guess, sort of blurring between those lines. And even if you look at innovation at different universities, it's often research and innovation. And, you know, those two things feed one another. So I guess the way I split it, this is making me think about this a little bit more.
I believe in it.
I guess like my initial thought is that within research, I guess the innovation part, I look more at sort of output. So like, how are you taking that research and creating something very tangible with it, or something that's a little bit more actionable. Whereas the research portion, it's more understanding, again, that sort of problem area, and there might be solutions developed to it, but the innovation is, I guess, more, what does that look like in action, and how are people like sort of taking those ideas and then doing something or creating something with them.
Yeah, like discovery and then delivery.
Yeah. Thank you for summarizing that so succinctly.
Yeah. Okay, what was it like to do all of this work at the Games Institute? Because you weren't technically a Games Institute employee. You were employed by the Office of Research on behalf of ETSI, now CRIT. But you sat here every day, and your mentors, Neil and Agata, were Games Institute people.
Yeah. first of all, Neil and Agata, super, super helpful in trying to understand what I was doing, because I came into this being like, oh, so like I know that the job description was like pretty vague in what I'm doing, but I was like, I have a general sense. But I'm like, by the time I get there, they'll, you know, the scope will probably be narrowed, or someone will be able to give me some sort of
and that's
tangible
not
narrow
what
scope. Not what happened at all.
Yeah, we just confused her more within the first week, actually, because I had to do a handover. I did the preliminary report, and my approach to it was entirely opposite from what you later did. I did a blue sky thing. I did a like, let's not scope this at all. Let's just go and see what pops up when I do, you know, different searches. And then handing that over to you, you were like, whoa, where's the problem space?
Yeah. So they were pretty helpful in trying to help me navigate that a little bit more, and sort of having people to bounce ideas off of and being like, is this useful? Is this not? And also making me feel a lot more assured and actually in the work that I was doing, because I think they did a really, really good job of encouraging me and being like, hey, you can produce lots of reports during this. You can produce one. You can produce none at all. You know, like, don't think of your work here as something narrowly defined by, you know, you need to produce this, and this deliverable. Like, that's going to change. And so that was really useful to just sort of have them as like a backbone of support.
Yeah,
and
to know to prioritize the work before the output.
And even with, like, I mean, other coworkers like you and Christina and Pam, like, it's helpful to just kind of have people who I can say things to or to kind of flesh out some ideas with. So that was really helpful in terms of having, like, a network of support at the Games Institute, and even just putting into context, like, even, like, some of the researchers that I was looking at and the role that I found even, like, games were a part of that, and how, especially, like, virtual reality, people doing a lot of work with using that as like a tool for rehabilitation, for example, and trying to apply that in healthcare, and things like that help sort of put more of my research in context and seeing, like, oh, day to day, like, you know, I'm seeing what these researchers are doing a little bit more. And so it made it a little bit more tangible as well, and trying to, and also just kind of broadening in my mind what social impact and the combination of that and technology actually looks like, because I think, especially, like, I have a problem with, I get really focused on trees instead of forests, and so I'll be like, oh, well, I have this narrow definition of technology and what that looks like in terms of ethics and social impact, but then kind of it forced me to, like, step back a little bit and be like, oh, well, yeah, like, this is technology related to social impact, and, like, and then trying to kind of reconfigure my ideas around that and be like, what other areas am I not considering that? Yeah. If that makes sense.
Do you have a definition of ethics now?
I don't know. Because I guess I would still more broadly define it as sort of understanding or trying to understand or shape different principles to live by, and trying to understand the role of morality in that, and how that changes. But again, like, the more I look into this and the more I learn about it, not even just within this role, but through my own interest in reading different things, ethics is such a gray space. And so I guess you could, like, having a broad understanding of ethics in terms of, you know, principles and morals and rules, and trying to find ways to conceptualize that and apply that in life is more of, like, a general understanding of it. But then looking at ethics in practice, it's like a whole separate issue, and trying, well, not completely separate, obviously, but in terms of trying to conceptualize that, and, like, oh, what does right and wrong look like in action in this space, and, like, when you're dealing with this group of people, or when you're working in a place with a completely different culture that values different things. I don't think that's necessarily gotten a whole lot clearer, but not that I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's just kind of broadening my understanding of what ethics looks like to different people, and then also understanding the challenges then that come with that, and even, you know, going back to shaping policy or having good governance in these areas, like how, you know, like I easily get frustrated when I'm like, why does it take the government so long to do things? And you're like, well, you know, like in part that's also because you know, you can argue so many different ways on certain things, and so that can get a little bit more complicated. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, actually very much so, because like I do not think that I have a definition for ethics, nor would I be satisfied with many definitions, because you kind of rub up against, well, who gets to decide what this definition is. Yeah. And then there's this kind of sense that a lot of people have with ethics that it's a know it when you see it type of thing. But even then, that's trained, right? We sense ethics based on our accumulative knowledge of what ethics is based on what other people have told us. And if you live in a specific area, your definition of ethics is going to look very different than somebody else's who lives across the world. And so to not have a definition of ethics and to be satisfied with the openness of it is really important for a job like yours, and for what Crit is going to be moving forward, which is going to have to adapt and be aware of. Okay, then I guess it's time to take a turn and talk about werewolf.
Oh.
Tobin's favorite part.
Oh, yes.
Because we used werewolf a lot around the Institute for various reasons.
So much.
What was your feeling about us playing werewolf anytime we had to celebrate something big? Maybe if there was a down day.
You play it as a celebration, not as punishment?
For pretty much anything.
I laughed so hard I coughed. Yeah, we played it in the first week to kind of warm everybody up to one another as the icebreaker, and then we responded to it so well as a team that then when something big happened, we celebrated with it. And then when something bad happened, we cheered each other up with it.
We basically just found any excuse to play werewolf, essentially.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Friday? Okay.
Yeah, that is true. What was that like in your working experience?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really good way to get to know people's personalities, and the way that they function. I mean, it's funny also to see like people's competitive sides and like, oh, who actually is like really invested in the outcome of it, because you know, like even just talking about like past games, like people remember, oh, I remember one time I won this way, and I'm like, I literally don't remember how any of these games ended other than the one time where there was me and 3 other people, and then 3 other people ended up being a werewolf because there's a doppelganger and there was literally no way I could have won. But that's like the only memorable one in my mind, where it's like there's some people who keep like track of like, oh, well, I won like twice on this week, you know. But I think it was a good sort of getting to know you game, and then also just kind of like building team bonding, because I think there's a little bit more banter that you can have with that. And so I thought it was a good team building exercise.
Yeah, a lot less expensive than going to escape rooms.
Exactly.
You had a very unique play style because
it's called I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, but poker face.
Yeah, ignorance still is like you can veil it. That's what I did too. I was like, I don't know, because I don't like it. So I was.
And Grace withheld information.
Yeah, I mean, my go-to line was, I'm not going to tell you until it's mission critical. But that was like, I mean, I guess because I'm coming to the end of this term anyway, I can expose my secrets. But that was literally like, I would just say that because I was like, I'm so confused about what's going on right now, and I'm scared to expose information that I don't know the value of yet. So I would just use that and pretend like it was me just trying to be a memer. But
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's effective though.
Yeah, it's quite.
I mean, other people have started co-opting it, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty shocked, I gotta say, because I thought that you really were deliberately withholding the information until it was mission critical.
Yeah, that's why it's such a good
I mean,
ploy.
it was I guess kind of mission critical for me, because I'm like, I need to wait until I expose myself to know if I'm really posing any threats.
Okay, my mind just went somewhere. Okay. So a few episodes ago, we had Gustavo Tendello come on the podcast, and also Stuart Halifax, and their research with Leonard Naka is all about player preferences and player behaviors. So how your personality relates to how you play games, but also what your preferences are in the games, play
Yeah.
styles, basically.
I'm participating in their study right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be telling you about it.
No, continue. So ethical.
You can cover your ears for this part, and this is just for the listeners. No, I'm kidding. But it's interesting to hear you talk about how your play style in Werewolf is to not withhold information, not make moves, but to assess the situation, to understand it, and make sure that you were confident with what you were doing. So you were an information collector.
Mm-hmm.
You were an observer
Yeah.
until you had to make a move, but you weren't going to make any moves prematurely because that's not you. And then I think about the way that you approached this job and the way that you tackled the challenge of not knowing what the problem space was, what
Yeah.
the scope was. You waited, you collected all the information, you built out that process so much more than I think other people would have in this role, because that's kind of the way that you tackle large projects, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is that making sense? Is that resonating?
No, that makes sense. That's kind of my personality. That's the way I like to tackle life.
Yeah, and it's so cool now to think about how that translates to a silly game like Werewolf.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't even really draw that connection before, but
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if you could play one game, or sorry, if you could have everybody in the world play one game, what would it be?
This, by the way, is the infamous
Yeah.
ice former,
Okay.
reformer question.
I guess this game is on my mind because I had mentioned it to you the other day, but when I was younger, so my family is not really all that games oriented. My dad hates games, and the only game I've ever seen him play willfully was this game called If You Had to Choose.
Mm.
And I think, and I mean, I started playing that when I was like pretty little. But I think that a game like that, although you have, games like Werewolf where you can sort of see how people's personality and the way that they handle things sort of emerge, I really liked If You Had to Choose because I think it forces people to think really critically about things that they value, and the type of person they are, and the relationships that they value in their life. And I think it's a really interesting game to play. So I feel like if I could make everyone play that game, I would.
So is it a card game? Like
yeah. It's like you have cards that kind of, sort of give you a dilemma of sorts,
So if you had to choose going on a roller coaster or eating a dead raccoon, like something
they're
like that.
Yeah, except they're far more intense.
Yes.
Be like, if you had to choose, would you rather see, your loved one die a slow, painful death, or would you, blah, 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 blah.
Is this you playing it at 4? Is that what you said?
Not 4. I was probably like, probably around like maybe like 6 or 8 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I'm like, I feel like probably played some part in shaping
I mean,
my
no, like
personality.
to each their own. Everybody confronts the realities of
Yeah.
the universe at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting to think about how that forms the way that you approach dilemmas, is you can stack it against something else.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting game. And I feel like that's the only game I've played that is really, really, like, in a way that's fun and that you can play with other people, but it also leads to, like, much more intense discussions. And that's something I really like.
Oh, and that creates critical moments for parents. Because you can say, well, think it through.
Yeah, and then you discuss, and then you see like, oh, so like this person, even if we want to weave the whole ethics element into it and how that can be really gray, and sort of understanding like, oh, like this person who comes from this context interprets this question in this way, or would prefer this outcome, and like let's understand why that is. And so I think that's a really cool discussion piece, and it's a thought provoker.
Yeah, we should play that around here. Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem.
This has been a great way to start the morning. I'm going to be thinking about ethics all day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You should be. And also thank you. All right. And do you have any closing remarks about maybe where people can find you online if they have questions?
Oh, whoa. Well, I don't have Twitter. I have Instagram, but I don't really know how great that is for discussions.
Yeah.
For
now, people can contact
yeah.
us here at the Institute.
Look me up on the Waterloo White Pages. University of Waterloo White Pages. Grace Wright. Actually, it might be under Christine. I don't know. But
oh, yeah.
that's a whole separate.
She's got 2 first names.
Just one, but a middle name that I've taken as my first.
Oh.
I was
wow.
actually forced upon me as my first. I didn't really have an option. I didn't have a say in the matter. It just kind of happened. But anyway.
I wonder what life as Christine Wright would have been doing differently.
Oh.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.